The Adventurers Guild. It's hosted within a very plain-looking gray-bricked building here in Nuleva, but I'd heard that elsewhere the buildings get very fancy. It's said that in one of the gnomish countries their buildings are made of solid gold, but I don't know if I believe that. What's to stop people from shaving bits off when nobody's looking? Although, as one of the largest multinational organizations in the world, the Adventurers Guild could probably afford to replace the shaved bits of their buildings. It's still hard to imagine that they have ultra-luxurious buildings when faced with how mundane their branch in Nuleva is, though. Things look just as plain on the inside as they do on the outside. I'd expected Nick to be underwhelmed, but his typically stoic face appeared enamored with every little detail surrounding us. The quest board, surrounded by adventurers looking for a good job to match their skills. The gathering area, where you can grab a bite to eat or a pint to drink before setting off. You normally wouldn't eat here after a job, because there are better places to eat in the village. I personally prefer Corno's fried food over what the Adventurers Guild has on offer. Nick seemed particularly interested in the trader pit, where an adventuring party was selling loot they'd gotten from a dungeon dive. We'd already explained to Nick that you can buy and sell stuff at the guild when he was being fussy about turning freelancer, but seeing is believing, I suppose. The pit's where I bought my axe. "Hi there," Nima greeted us. "How can I help you?" "Hi, Nima," Yulk said. "We'd like to register Nick as an adventurer." "Oh, you're the human, aren't you?" she asked. Nick stammered an affirmative. Most of the people that frequent Nuleva are used to seeing Nima around, so it took me a second to realize what had the boy nervous. Then I realized that he didn't have anything not to be nervous about. Nima is notable for her beauty, wears barely anything, and above all else is 7 feet tall. Heh, above all else. Orc women don't typically get as tall as our men do, but Nima is related to Alern, so I guess it makes sense. That whole family is huge. If I remember right, she's his half-sister, but they're not close. Alern's dad ran off on Nima's mom or something. Considering how similar Nima and her mom look, I can't even begin to fathom why he would run off. All right. So we'll have you fill out some forms, and then we'll get you connected to the Curaguard to determine your level. Then we'll do your newbie brief, she explained. "Oh, okay," came Nick's suave reply. I couldn't help but grin. From Nick's height, there was no way to maintain proper eye contact and avoid staring at Nima's head-sized breasts. Instead, he was staring firmly at the counter like a well-trained pupper, trying to avoid gazing longingly at their owner's food. Most of the other races have difficulty not staring, and I suppose humans are no different. My amusement was cut short when I realized that I might have to have an awkward conversation with the boy about orc sexual compatibility, namely, the lack thereof. Maybe I can pawn it off on Yulk. He's much more open about such discussions and would probably be better at it. I glanced at him, but he was studying Nick with a slightly confused look on his face. Oh, right, he's a dunce when it comes to sexuality. Shit. "Here you go," Nima said as she set a packet on the counter. "There are pencils at the table over there. Fill these out and bring them back, okay?" Yeah, thank you," Nick stammered. Nima and I made eye contact, and she smiled knowingly. I grinned in response as we turned to head to the gathering area. She had previously made it clear that she likes me, but I wasn't ready to commit just yet. I don't have the finances to give her the life she deserves. Instead, we'd made a deal that when I get to level 10, we'd try dating and see where things went. When you hit level 10, you get access to better-paying jobs and 50% of the retail value of the goods you sell, which would give me enough money to support Mom and properly court Nima. We'd made this deal last year when I was only level 6, and I'd been grinding hard ever since. Nick said as we got to one of the tables. "I can't read this." "What?" I asked. "I don't understand this writing," he clarified. "But you speak perfect Orcish. How are you unable to read it?" I demanded. "Probably the same way you can't," Yulk said, causing me to flinch. "This is something that I've been thinking about, though. Why is it that you can speak Orcish, Nick?" "I'm not. I'm speaking English," Nick replied. "I thought you were speaking English. What the hell is going on?" "That's what I would like to know. English? I'd never heard of English. Must be a language from his world or whatever. But in this world there are only 8 languages: Orcish, Elvish, Daimon, Drow, Drakon, Dwarven, Gnomish, and Anulish. They're all similar enough that it's easy to learn to speak and understand them. Yulk taught me how to speak them when he got back from schooling around. It was pretty fun until we got to the writing part. I can't seem to wrap my head around letters and words no matter what language they're in. Don't have that problem with math, though. Numbers are nice. Maybe it's a skill? Yulk ventured. It's not on my skill list, though, Nick said. Yulk pondered for a moment. Is your skill list ability listed on your skill list? No. Then maybe whatever is allowing you to see your skill list is also automatically translating what you hear and say. Yeah, I interrupted impatiently. You might be able to speak all the languages. Congrats, whatever. Problem is, you can't read them. Have Yulk fill out the forms for you like he did for me? The two of them looked at me with blank expressions, as if they hadn't already thought of that solution, and were surprised that I was the one that came up with it. I crossed my arms and glared back at them. What the hell are you looking at? You didn't think of that? I demanded. I'm supposed to be the dumb one. We're going to be in real trouble if it turns out that I'm the smartest of the 3 of us. Fair enough, Yulk replied, but I'll have you know that dumb means you're not able to talk. So just by the merit of being able to yell at us, you're not… Whatever, I interrupted. Just get the fucking forms filled out. Yulk grinned at me and grabbed the forms from Nick. He began reading aloud as I sat down next to them. The questionnaire portion went by fairly easily, except for a couple of parts. We had to add our own answer to species, and there was some confusion when it came to the race part. Turns out that Nick's world had a different definition of race than ours, so Yulk explained that your race was based off of where your parents are based. So Nick is an American human. His children would also be American humans, but his grandchildren would be Nulevan humans. Assuming he found other humans and had children, and those children stuck around Nuleva. Yulk began to explain the various reasons why one's race was accounted for, and I zoned out. International diversity treaties and bans are boring. Instead, I thought about what life would be like with Nima. We'd date for a year or two, then have a nice year-long engagement followed by a wedding, if all went well. I've even planned out our first date. I'll come by with a gift, a nice 16-inch engraved hunting knife, and take her out to dinner at Corno's. Then we'll swing by the training arena and watch people spar until the sun goes down, and to wrap up the date, we'll stargaze. If she still likes me afterward, then she'll decide what we do on the next date. Once we get engaged, we'll be moving in together. I'll probably have to knock down a wall to give us some more room in my bedroom. It'll be a pain, but we'd also get a bigger living room out of it. Well, unless her mom makes a fuss and has me move in with them instead. I don't think that'll happen, though. So if a guild can prove that they've hired a certain amount of irritants, they'll get access to governmental jobs from Irida. And even bonuses, Yulk said. Anyways, on to the disclosures. First is the payment system. Until you're level 5, the guild will be taking a 20% commission on your jobs and giving you a 1% discount on guild-related services. You also get 10% of retail for drops you sell to the guild. What guild-related services? Nick asked. Food, gear, and medical? Well, the medical that you have to pay for, at least, I replied. What medical stuff is free? Anything life-threatening. The stuff that isn't considered life-threatening, like rashes or cosmetic stuff, you've got to pay for. The deals get better as you level up too, Yulk explained. When you hit level 5, the commission drops down to 15%, and you get a 5% discount. And 25% of retail on your drops, I added. At level 10, it's 10% on the commission, 10% on the discount, 50% of retail on the drops, and access to better paying jobs. Then at level 20, it gets even better. It's 5% commission, 65% of retail, a 15% discount, and no limitations on jobs. At that point, if you want a job, it's yours. Okay, I get it now, Nick said. But what are these jobs? I thought you just went in the dungeon and got stuff to sell. The jobs vary. There's jobs for going in the dungeon to find specific drops, exterminating monsters in the wastes, escorting travelers, and other things like that, I answered. The more intense the job's expected to be, the higher the level restriction and pay is. It's not a perfect system, though, so you should be careful about which jobs you accept. Fetch quests are an under five's bread and butter, Yulk added. So basically, the higher my level, the less they take from my pay and the more benefits I actually get, Nick said. All right. This next part's about the examinations. Yulk flapped a page. You agree to a quarterly review of your level as well as magical, physical, and mental health. You also understand that if you are found to have a health issue, you will be required to get treatment before you can accept further jobs. You have the right to decline treatment and the right to have your level checked at any time. Magical health? Nick asked. Yeah, I said, like a curse or something wrong with your core. Yulk sorted the papers in front of Nick and said, All right, we're just about through them all. There's still the stuff about the International Merchant Association, other associated guilds, and... I stopped listening after Yulk mentioned the International Merchant Association. Woe be unto Nick if he asks a question about the IMA. Yulk will talk his weirdly round ears right off his head. Instead, I decided to check the job board. It would be a while before the over 20s were ready to go into the dungeon, so hopefully there'd be a nice simple job to take Nick on. I looked at the board and ignored everything without artwork on it. The pictures drawn by the autoscribe were great, realistic and not stylized, so you know exactly what you're looking at. I grabbed a few promising ones, one about false mint, one about a tree with some fruits on it, and one regarding giant rats. I brought the 3 postings up to Nima. Hey Nima, Yulk and Nick are still filling out the paperwork, so I'm checking out the jobs. Could you read these to me? I asked. She looked confused for a second before remembering my issue regarding the written word, and then she looked embarrassed for forgetting. Then there was a smidge of pity in her eyes. I don't like being pitied, but when it's coming from those beautiful eyes, I guess it's all right. Aw, sweetie, she replied. Of course I will. This first one is a gathering mission for false mint from the forest depths. 50 leaves are needed. Ah, the forest, north or south. It doesn't specify, just need 50 false mint leaves from the forest. Okay, we might do that one. What's the next one about? Gathering yipples. They want a sack full. Where are the yipple trees? I scratched my neck. It had been years since I went gathering fruit. On the edge of the forest leading into the wastes to the south, she answered. The south, that's good. Might do that one too. What about the rats? Let's see. There's a pack of giant rats harassing caravans in the wastes to the south. Reports indicate there's only about a dozen, and the poster is offering 2 copper per pelt delivered to the guild. It's a level 5 and over job. Well, that should be fine. Yulk and I are over 5s, so we can bring Nick along as a party member, right? I asked, leaning on the counter with my most charming smile. Of course, she smiled back. But you will be censured if he gets killed or crippled, though. Fat chance of that, I replied. Despite appearances, that little fucker can pack a wallop. What's this? Nima asked, feigning shock. The legendary Nash giving praise to someone? He must be pretty capable. Yeah, laugh it up, I chuckled. Don't tell him I said that, though. He'll go and get an ego. My lips are sealed, she winked. Our eyes met and we smiled. The rest of the world faded away for a moment, before Yulk's voice snapped me back to reality. I missed what he said, so I looked back to Nima. She looked confused as well, and I got a fuzzy feeling in my chest when I realized she missed it too. We'd been lost in each other's eyes. The forms, Yulk slowly stated. They're done. We're ready for the examinations. What were you 2 up to? I was accepting some jobs for us to do to pass the time. We got herb and fruit gathering with some hunting in the wastes. Shouldn't take more than a day and a half, I said quickly. Herbs and fruit? I thought you guys only eat meat, Nick replied. Well, we fucking season it, we're not animals, I grumbled. And anyway, these jobs weren't posted by orcs, they were posted by traders and stuff. Right. Well, what are we hunting? He asked. Giant rats out in the wastes. We're grabbing the plants on the way there. Why's it always fucking rats? Nick grumbled under his breath. Hey, I countered. This is an over 5 quest. Don't underestimate giant rats. They're more than just a nuisance. They'll take down prey twice your size without a sweat. The only reason you're going to be able to do this job is because Yulk and I are protecting you. Now let's get your exams done so we can head out. Which one would you like to start with? Nima asked the human. I'd like to have my level assessed, please, he replied. Sure thing, she said cheerily as she reached into a drawer behind her. She pulled out a contraption and a metallic guild card and set them on the counter. The contraption that the guild uses to connect someone to the Kuraguard is a strange-looking thing. It's a rectangular box with 6 stubby legs, 1 on each corner and 2 in the middle. Each leg is made of a different metal, and the box itself looks like it's made of obsidian. She inserted the card in a slot on the part of the box facing us and pressed her fingers into some indents on her side of the box. Blue light spilled out of the top of the box and formed a square in front of us. Then green light shot out and entered the square, creating numbers, letters, and the palm of a hand. The light took on a mirror-like quality as it hardened, still hovering a few inches above the contraption. Then she fed the forms into the back of the box. All right, please place your hand on the handprint until you feel a slight electric shock, Nima said. Without saying anything, Nick reached out and placed his hand on the hardened light. It was a full 10 seconds before Nick winced slightly and withdrew his hand. I shared a look with Yulk. This thing was usually much faster. It made some weird noises that sounded a lot like birds chirping, and then the numbers and letters changed. Yulk and Nima looked at the letters and numbers with confusion. So did Nick and I, but that's only natural considering our inability to read the damned things. Once the 2 readers recovered from their confusion, their eyebrows shot up. What is it? I asked, growing impatient. He's level 5, Yulk answered in a quiet voice. I looked at him intently, trying to figure out if he was joking. When I turned to look at Nima, her expression told me he wasn't. Is that rare? Nick asked. Yeah, it is, I replied. What's his class? Unknown, Nima said. Well, that figures, I chuckled, turning to Nick. Mine's unknown too. Has been ever since I hit level 7. Look, don't let your level get to your head. You're still inexperienced and should follow our lead during the hunt. Yeah, he responded. I will. On the bright side, though, the quest level isn't a problem anymore. Smartass, I grumbled. Better to be a smartass than a dumbass, Yulk grinned. All right, let's get the rest of the exams out of the way. Yeah, go on. I'm gonna hang out here for a bit, I said. Nima, Yulk, and Nick went to the medical portion of the guild hall while I sat at the gathering area. I stared at the 3 job posters. Level 5, huh? I can't help but be a little jealous. It had taken me so long to reach that milestone. So many monsters slain, so many friends lost. All Nick needed was a little training. It might have been even more depressing if we had trained him longer. I hope he at least lives up to the level. I'm still trapped in the tree. The food and water I had are gone, and these damned rats are still waiting for me to come down. They've been taking shifts, some sleeping during the day and the rest sleeping at night. Every now and then they try climbing up after me, but a few well-placed kicks and pokes with my dagger thwart their efforts. I am tired, thirsty, and my ass is extremely sore due to the bark of this tree. They're still eating my pack animals, so it's unlikely I'll be able to outlast them. Eventually I will fall from my perch. A miserable existence fated to meet a miserable end, eaten by rats. If you find this, please avenge me. Make sure no one else shares my fate. Imlor Tula. I closed the journal and put my pencil away. What an unfortunate thing to have to use a brand new journal for. I glared at the giant rats below me, and their beady red eyes glared right back. From up here they looked a normal size, but in reality they were only slightly smaller than myself. I'm tall for a gnome, 3-6 inches in fact, and I shudder to think what could have happened if I had been even an inch shorter. My wagon and pack animals were still in view. The rats had sprung their ambush and killed both my Narcies before they could react. They had covered themselves in sand along the trail and either hadn't noticed me or decided that the beasts of burden were the best targets. This, and some quick thinking, gave me barely enough time to scale this tree before they... I shuddered. The damage to the wagon is irreparable. Those teeth and claws had made short work of the wooden sides and cover. The wagon had cost me 50 silver, more than both the narses combined. The rats had broken it open like a cask, trying to get to the sweet meats within. A small shipment for a certain orc chef in Nulava. I looked down at the 5 rats that were currently patrolling the base of the tree. "Fuck you!" I shouted to the vermin. They chittered back at me. I normally would have hired an adventurer escort, but business had taken a rotten turn as of late. My beefery had caught fire and I ended up having to pay to have it rebuilt as well as compensation for the workers who were injured. I had spent half of my remaining capital to fulfill this order. The freshly smelted metals that the Nulavan Adventurers Guild branch had ordered are fine, but I no longer have a way to transport them. I chuckled at my optimism, as if I had a need to transport them now. I am going to die. Exposure, starvation, or dehydration. It was a toss-up which would claim me first. I only hoped that I wouldn't weaken to the point of falling out of the tree before my untimely demise. Getting eaten to death promises to be a painful way to perish. I looked at the corpses of my narses. Hulk and Noble, they'd been with me for most of their lives. Never again would Hulk softly chomp my arm, nor Noble softly blow my hair as I geared them up. They were rambunctious, like my own children. It's going to be hard for Telena to take care of them without me. I can only hope that my life insurance will let them live comfortably. The house is paid off, and I've still got enough capital to feed them for the month that it'll take before it kicks in. If another trader uses this route and finds my remains, it'll kick in even faster. Some movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. A trio of people. 2 orcs and an elf were walking the path. Rescue or further tragedy? I weakly stood up and started waving my arms at them. "Rats! Beware! Giant rats on the road!" I screamed. The 3 stopped and looked at me. They were still too far away to make out their expressions, and I kept waving and shouting. I screamed at them to run and get help. They faced each other for a moment and then started jogging over. Adventurers? I didn't dare to hope. Perhaps they are simply foolish vagabonds who can't hear me properly and are about to join Hulk and Noble wherever the dead things go. My voice weakened to the point of a whisper as they drew closer and closer. I looked at the rats, and my stomach fell as they turned to greet the trio. My heart skipped a beat when a loud bang rang out. The rat I had been staring at was bisected, and wind rushed through my tree. I grabbed the trunk to keep from falling and watched 2 of the trio pull weapons from under their capes. An axe and a sword. I almost jumped for joy. I am rescued. Of the 2 melee fighters, the orc was definitely more skilled. I watched in awe as he fluidly carved through his opponents. The second orc was obviously a sorcerer, casting spells at rats who were trying to flank the fighters. The spells were plenty powerful too. The elf wasn't bad with its blade, but then something happened that made my jaw drop open. A rat charged the elf and it cast a fireball that instantly fried the damn thing. A magic user with a blade? Will wonders never cease. My celebration was short-lived, though. More and more giant rats joined the fray. 5 became 15, then 30. I watched in anticipation as the adventurers kept fighting and fighting. The end goal of the rats seemed to be to wear them down enough to land a killing blow. When one considers the casualties, it's a disgusting tactic. But vermin don't seem to care about morality. Just meat. But the adventurers didn't seem to get tired. If anything, they were getting better at working as a team. The sorcerer was launching spells from both of his hands, and the spell sword was using his magic and weapons simultaneously. The orc with an axe was using it like a scalpel, carving just enough of each rat's flesh to be fatal without expending unnecessary effort. The change in demeanor was impressively seamless. Before I knew it, 50 rats lay dead at the feet of my rescuers. I clambered down the tree and approached them, being careful not to step on any of the viscera that was strewn across the ground. The orc was wiping down his axe. The elf was holding his bloodied blade, looking a bit lost. I pulled a rag out of my tunic and offered it to him with a grin. It wasn't until we got close to each other that I noticed something was wrong. His eyes were blue but lacked the ethereal glisten that an elf's would have, and his ears were rounded. He returned my grin, and I noticed that the flat teeth one would see in an elf's mouth were flanked by sharp ones. I carefully maintained my grin, even though terror gripped my heart. It isn't right to be afraid of one's rescuers, but I couldn't help it. This thing was an unfamiliar Myrrh, and had demonstrated that it was very proficient in combat. "Thank you," it said. You're welcome," I stammered through my now false grin. Thank you, I thought I was a goner." "You look nervous," the sorcerer said with a knowing smile. "Never seen a human before?" "Of course he hasn't," the one with an axe replied. "You think a trader's gonna have seen more than an entire village of adventurers?" A human?" I asked. "Introductions, then. I am Yulk Alta. This is my brother Nash," the sorcerer began, gesturing to the orc with an axe. "And this is Nicodemus Smith, the newest adopted member of Clan Alta. He is a human." "Oh, I see. Well, I am Imlor Tula of the Tula Transportation Company. Pleasure to meet you, truly. I don't wish to be a burden, but I don't suppose you have food and drink?" I asked, slumping to the ground as my fatigue caught up with me. "We have drink and some yipples. We'll have to replace what you eat on our way back, though. Here, eat your fill while we gather the hides," Nash said, tossing a sack and a water bag to me. "Is that your wagon?" "Thank you so much. And yes, it is, but the rats got to it," I explained as I gulped down water gratefully. "I'll have a look at it since I'm not great with bending over," Yulk said. "Okay, let's get to work, Nick," Nash commanded. "I counted about 40. "I counted 52, the human replied. The axe-wielding orc looked down at the human for a moment, and then at the corpses of the giant rats. He mumbled to himself for a while and then scoffed. 54. "We're both wrong," he grumbled. "Whatever, let's get skinning." Nick watched Nash closely as he took the pelt from the first giant rat, and then began to copy what he had seen. What an interesting creature. I had assumed that he was a young elf due to his height and skin tone. Elves usually get to be about 6.5 feet tall. As I studied him closer, I saw even more differences, though. He had hair on his arms and stubble growing out of his face, like a freakishly tall dwarf who had shaved himself recently. There were tales of such practices on the South Continent. Rumor has it that it's because of the heat. Maybe the southern dwarves call themselves humans? No, that doesn't explain the height and the teeth. I munched on yipples while the others carved the rats up. I'm not typically a fan of fruits, but these were the most delicious yipples I've had in my entire life. After I filled my belly and rested for a bit, I got to work helping Nick and Nash gather the pelts. "How did there get to be so many?" Nick asked. "They breed fast. This is probably only about a few generations worth," I answered. "Yup, they start out sneaky and timid, but the more of them there are, the more desperate they get for food. That's when they get dangerous," Nash added. "Why didn't they try to run away, though?" "Blood frenzy. It's what separates monsters from animals. If you get attacked by a pack of wolves, you can survive if you kill enough of them. The rest will run away. If you get attacked by a pack of dire wolves, you're going to have to kill all of them to survive. Monsters don't run," Nash said. "Well, if you're quick enough, you can run away," I said with a laugh. "Or scamper up a tree and hope some adventurers come along." We all chuckled and silence fell as the enormity of our task drew our attention. It was messy work, too, and once we were done, Yulk approached us. "How's the wagon?" Nash asked. "It'd be nice not to have to carry 50 pelts back to the village." "Right? I thought we were going to be dealing with a dozen max," Yulk chuckled. "Anyway, the axles, sides, and roof are all shot, but the wheels and bed are fine. If we can get the wheels off the axles and flip it, I can probably fix the axles with mend. Dunno how we're going to secure our cargo and pull it, though. Nick and I can be the beasts of burden. You and, Nash trailed off, looking at me. "Imlor Tula," I replied. "Right. You and Imlor Tula can keep the stuff from falling off, or let us know when it does so we don't leave it in the dust," he finished. "I don't suppose you'd be able to pull the original cargo as well?" I tentatively asked. "It's about 100 pounds of metals for the Adventurers Guild." "Shouldn't be a problem. Gonna have to make a stop for the yipples, though. Nick and I will rest while the two of you grab some more." And so it went. We managed to take the wheels off the wagon and get it flipped over, and Yulk was able to repair the axles with a spell. We affixed the wheels back onto the wagon and loaded everything back up. I said a quiet goodbye to Hulk and Noble while Nick and Nash used what was left of the harnesses to start pulling the wagon. As I began to walk next to the wagon, I struggled to fight back tears of joy. I survived.